Social media is doing harm to our kids, and I'm calling time on it.
The plan broadly is to ban teenagers under 16 from accessing social media.
And I want Australian parents and families to know that the government has your back.
He's choking me! He's choking me! Let go!
Do governments own our children? No, they do not. And yet, increasingly in the Western world, we see instances where the government wants to take the place of parents and undermine parental authority. In fact, they're trying to own the coming generation so they can indoctrinate them in a secular worldview. Now, there's legislation coming out of Australia that is concerning because of this issue of where do you draw the line between what the government does and parents in regard to your children. And I believe this is unlocking a door that could undermine parental authority increasingly so. Now, the headline was, Australia plans a social media ban for children under 16. And the article read, the Australian government announced what it described as world-leading legislation that would institute an age limit of 16 years for children to start using social media and hold platforms responsible for ensuring compliance. Now, first of all, I just don't see how they're going to police that. I just don't see how it's going to work.
This is going to be like trying to pick up mercury with a fork, trying to reel them back. It's going to be impossible.
More concerning than that, the Prime Minister of Australia was quoted in the article as saying, parental consent would not entitle a child under 16 to access social media.
We will not allow exemptions if users have parental consent.
Parental consent. And we read in the article as well, where it stated the proposal comes as governments around the world are wrestling with how to supervise young people's use of technologies. Does the government really have a right to be able to tell your children what they can and can't do in that sense? Isn't that the parents' responsibility to train children? Now, I know a lot of parents don't train their children like they should, and certainly the most do not train them in a biblical worldview. But what does the Bible say? Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, Psalm 127:3. That means they're a gift from the Lord to parents to train for him. Ultimately, God owns children, and God entrusts them to parents. And we read in Isaiah 38:19, the father shall make known your truth to the children. It's the father's responsibility as the head of the home to train their children. Now, I remember some time ago when President Biden in the USA made the statement that when children go to the government schools, the public schools, secular schools, that then when they're in school, they don't belong to the parents, they belong to the teachers.
They're not someone else's children. They're our children. They're all our children. And the reason you're the teachers of the year is because you recognize that. They're not somebody else's children. They're like yours when they're in the classroom.
But that is not true. That's undermining parental authority. They always belong to the parents and ultimately to God. So there's one concerning aspect of this. And the other is this. It's very interesting. The Prime Minister of Australia said this.
Social media is doing harm to our kids, and I'm calling time on it.
In other words, here's the Prime Minister saying, look what's happening to our kids. Social media is harming our kids. And so therefore I'm going to do something about this. Well, number one, he doesn't own the children. The parents own the children. But number two, he is so inconsistent and really hypocritical because the Prime Minister of Australia supports abortion. That means killing children in their mother's womb. He says he doesn't want to see children harmed, and yet he supports that. And he supports the transgender movement, which harms children. And the LGBTQ worldview that harms children. And so he really is being hypocritical there. And we need to understand, again, that it's God who owns children. Ultimately, he entrusts them to parents. So what is the government's role then? Well, in 1 Peter 2, 1 Peter 2, 13 to 14, we read this, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king or to one in authority or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. In other words, that's very similar to Romans 13. A summary of the government's role actually is for the government to maintain the rule of law for punishing evil. That's what the government's role is. And it's also to give praise to those who do right rather than doing good itself. And so the government increasingly in our Western world certainly is not doing what the Bible says the government is to do. They've stepped out of that role. They want to control our morality and parental rights in every area, and so it goes on. And so we need to certainly be aware of that.